All right, so we always hear a lot about this Pearson correlation coefficient as one of the ways, and I got the math down in order to create it, but what I've done with these measures is taken all of these different assets, and we looked over a specific period of time and calculated the correlation coefficient. This is something Wales only talks a lot about, right? And because and it's always perplexing, right? Because for a long time we had this narrative that it's not correlated. Hex isn't correlated to Bitcoin, and then price moves with it, and there's lots of questions about, well, you said it wasn't correlated, so why is it going in the same direction? Well, correlation isn't the same as causation, and there's also time frame differences. The motivations of why people do things and et cetera, right? So it's not a dead set that these numbers predict the future, but what they're doing is a measure in the past. And so in the example of taking like Bitcoin and ETH over this time period, we came up with a score out of 1.96, which just simply means it's nearly as close as possible to, they move the same percentage roughly up and down, in the same amount during this period of time. And so the more negative you get, closer to -1, the closer you are to being absolutely not correlated, like any of the other ones like that. Let's see.
I kind of like
Like,
the ranked correlations. This is kind of neat. It's an easy way for people to
yeah,
view
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, you can bring that
Maybe
up.
let's use something that's been around for a while. We'll use EHEX here just because it's been around the block for a while. So yeah, not surprisingly, guys, because EHEX and HEX were basically the same asset until HEX spawned into existence, right? They have a 0.94 correlation. And look at what's next in line, DESI. The DESI Maximus Dow coins, Maxi. Things that are actually staked HEX are what's mostly correlated with EHEX. You get a little bit of a correlation with, a lot with icosahedron, and then pulse here, 0.75. So if EHEX goes up 10%, pulse goes up 7.5% over this time frame. Maybe you look at BTC. BTC and ETH are basically the same asset for all intents and purposes, which makes sense if you consider that all the liquidity on all these centralized exchanges is the main pairings is Bitcoin and ETH, right? Or they had been in the past. Now we're getting more dollar dependency, but if people are using dollar, they're not using Bitcoin, which is why this is a negative 0.73, because people are dumping Bitcoin for dollars. Well, then dollars going to go up while Bitcoin's going down. So it explains that they're negatively correlated. They're going to do the opposite of each other. So if Bitcoin's going up 10%, the dollar's going down 7.3%. If the dollar's going, up 10%, Bitcoin's going down 7.3% in the same time frame. Rough kind of framework for understanding these things.
Well, isn't it interesting? Hex on this time frame is nearly zero. EX and Hex are nearly zero as compared to Bitcoin.
Interesting. Very interesting. Good pointing that out. Yeah, that tells me that they kind of beat to their own drum, and they're just going to, it's close to neutral as possible. It's hard. There's almost no correlation between what EHEX and HEX were going to do over the past, how long is this? 65 days, and what Bitcoin was going to do. And so you can draw conjecture on the whys, but what matters is just the data. Here's an interesting one. I'm a little bit biased, but Axis and Fire token are actually more correlated than even Bitcoin and ETH. And why would that be? It's because of Hart's law, because Fire's deepest and thickest pair of liquidity is between Axis token. So long as no buyers and sellers steps in on the Fire pair, it's literally going to ride up and down because it's getting its entire dollar valuation from what Axis's dollar valuation is. And unfortunately, it's like leverage on leverage, because Axis gets its dollar valuation from Pulse, which is all the way down here to negative 0.32. So we're actually, Axis token is actually negatively correlated with Pulse, which is funny because it has tended to overperform Pulse. over the last few months. So that's partly why that is.
Do you have time to click on Atropa and PDI?
Oh boy.
You have to go to the filtered one, the filtered page, and just select it off the list. Like grab like
Okay,
Atropa,
this is perfect.
PDI.
So you guys remember how PulseChain was kind of down in the dumps and didn't have a lot of activity, and then rumors started to swirl around about PDI and Atropa and a hidden dev, secret mysterious dev, and it could be RH, could it not be? Is this thing going to go peg to $1? Well, this thing, it beats to its own drum. It's funny enough, it's most correlated with crude oil and the dollar. And my theory for this is, dollar dominance was rising during this period, and in cryptocurrency, all of them, Bitcoin included here, you can see negative correlation. All that stuff was falling. Gold was falling. The stock markets were falling. It was max FUD during this time period. It was like a month and a half time period. And this was the only thing in all of these assets and all of the world that was going up with crude oil and the dollar. So my theory is that a bunch of rich Saudis were pumping the shit out of PDI and Atropa while no one else was looking, but that's just me.
Maybe.
Not too crazy.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think maybe one comment about how would you use correlation data carefully, right? Because it's the past, right, and it's not indicative of what happens in the future. But over a reasonable measurement period, maybe like the 65 days or whatever, however many you want to look at it for. Over that period of time, if you're really in touch with what's happening with the macro and all that's happening with the market around your particular asset, you might be able to look at it and say, well, if I'm seeing movement in one or expect one to move up, that this is my expectation for the other, or down, whichever the direction might be.
So here's our master matrix over a 60-day time frame. You can even see inside of here, it's like a matrix, right? You got this whole green box here, whole green box here, green box here, green box here. Why is that? You're getting these big green boxes on here, and that's all the same. Well, it's because it's the same assets: eDesi, eHedron, eHEX, eICOSA against Hedron, Helgo, Hex, ICOSA. So the really tightly paired together things that rely on each other for price, grabbing prices. That's why you're getting like really tightly correlated things all of the same kind, Maxi, derivative of Hex, ICOSA, derivative of Hex, Hex, Helgo, derivative of Hex, Hedron, derivative of Hex. Whereas you get these super negative ones, it's like NASDAQ against dollar, Deci. There's no reason why they should be connected right now.
Yeah, point out the connection between NASDAQ and Bitcoin and BTC, though. Look at those.
Oh, yeah. BTC here, NASDAQ here, 0.8.
Yeah. The best we could think is the tech bros love blue chips that they can get from, things like Robinhood.
Yep.
So you, like, if you're just looking at this, basically it's like whatever is green, the other side is, if it's got a red correlation, one is going up, the other is going down. It's like, how would you use this for data as far as, if you were trading or otherwise, like, can you do an example for that?
Yeah. So over 60 days time frame, this is the past 58 days, right? Over the past 58 days, you wouldn't have wanted to trade. You wouldn't have wanted to be in. Well, you shouldn't say that. I was going to say you don't want to be in these. Well, it's more of like for yourself. I'm trying to think of a simple way to put this, because there's a lot of ways you can break down this data, but depending on the time frame you're looking at, determines like what you can gather from it. I think it's better to just look at it as like, okay, maybe we go on a longer time frame. I hope I don't break it. Well, here's an 800 days. So this is like a longer time frame. So you're getting a more complete picture of how things have moved over the last 800 days versus just like a 60-day little window where things could be different during that time. If like the 60 days that you're looking at, there was a world cyber attack or something, then there's obviously going to be chaos in the market. So the data isn't as solid, but when you look at longer time frames, you can get more clear picture. Back to Crispy's point about BTC and the NASDAQ, if you started to see the NASDAQ perform well, but BTC was still down, well, typically over the last 800 days, NASDAQ rises, BTC is going to rise with it, with an 0.86 positive correlation. So if BTC is lagging behind, but NASDAQ's up, 15, 20%, that would be a good time to use this information and say, well, typically over the last 800 days, Bitcoin's going to go up too with NASDAQ. So you just want to get your position on that, right? So you look for laggard plays, but on longer time frames with positive correlations, perhaps, or strong negative correlations.
And just a comment, so if anybody asking or thinking about this is watching, for the assets that don't exist, the time frame's capped to their existence, right? So we know that some of these didn't exist out there, so they're just showing their total correlation.